Alright, what's up YouTube? We are at the end of the year, basically. I mean, this channel is, I guess, technically a year old, but, like, I didn't really start posting on it till, I think, February, but anyway, so for this, I think I'll be getting maybe one more final update video before the end of the year, but not much is really going to happen on that front, so this will be my final video of the year, and I would like to do a tier list of every book and short story that I read this year. So I've got them all here. I've got my little thumbnails and stuff for them, all on the tier list, and we'll just get into it. So first things first, a few rules, I guess, that need to be put out. This has to be a book that I actually read this year or reread this year. So you'll notice that some of the stuff that I reviewed, like Dracula, for example, isn't on here because I read Dracula like over 10 years ago. I just remember it quite well and then refresh my memory with like a brief synopsis, versus lots of these same with stuff like Frankenstein or Clockwork Orange and stuff like that. These are the ones I actually read or reread this year. So that's what we're doing, and I'm going to go into how I'm ranking these books. So for me, a D tier, I don't really know what D tier looks like, I'll be honest. Like, a D tier book is just a terrible book or story. C tier is below average. Like, either there's serious structural problems in the book, a sort of slightly below average book that I just don't like, or there is a huge problem with it. B tier is average, like, that's the average. A tier is good, and then S tier is like a book that I truly think goes beyond its peers and really is a standout, like, testament to what can be achieved in this medium. Another thing is I'm only ranking the fiction books I read this year, so notably the Communist Manifesto is not in this video because I don't really know how to rank that. It's just straight up a political manifesto, so that's not here either. So we'll just get into it. So first up, we have The Call of Cthulhu. So The Call of Cthulhu was the first video I posted on here in the book review channel sort of segments, and I'm gonna have to put it in C, which is kind of be strange for some people to think because it's The Call of Cthulhu, like it's the most famous H.P. Lovecraft book, but I'll be real. I do not think that Call of Cthulhu is that good. I don't think it's that well written. I don't think it's that scary. I don't think it's that interesting of a story. I think Lovecraft got a lot better as he got older when it came to his fiction, just the prose. But Cthulhu, I don't really like Cthulhu as a monster. Compared to other Lovecraftian monsters like Azathoth, the Dunwich Horror, even Nyarlathotep is more interesting than Cthulhu. This book really doesn't have a lot. Well, it's not a book; it's a story, but like it doesn't really have a lot going for it. And I'm actually surprised it's as popular as it is, to be honest, when compared with other Lovecraft stories and other Lovecraftian entities in the mythos. So yeah, I'm not a fan of Call of Cthulhu. It was the first Lovecraft book I ever read, and it's just not that gripping. Which may be sacrilegious to say, but I think Lovecraft is a phenomenal writer, but Call of Cthulhu ain't it. And although the Metallica song is pretty sick, so okay. Anyway, so the next book I read this year was V for Vendetta by Alan Moore, and I'm gonna pop this in A tier. I think V for Vendetta is a example of a great graphic novel. I mean, it's Alan Moore, so it's gonna be good. I think this book is really well written. The characters are very engaging. It can be quite funny. The satire works really well. But I do think it's too political. It reads as a straight up like anarchist manifesto half the time, and it's just a bit too weird to really be an S tier. I think the film's better, which is a weird opinion to have for a lot of stuff, but I do think the film is genuinely better. And I just think there's some gaps in the logic of the story and the writing, and it is too preachy to really be an S tier. So it is just going to be an A tier book, but still very, very good, and one of the best comics ever written. So, I mean, it's Alan Moore. The guy doesn't really miss, even if you don't agree with him politically, like, which I'm not sure anybody really agrees with Alan Moore politically, to be honest with you, but, yeah. So in the next one, we have Anthem by Ayn Rand, another political book. I'm going to put this in B tier. So this was the first and actually only Ayn Rand book I've ever read, which I'm glad I never had an Ayn Rand phase when I was like 15, because I know that 15-year-old me would have thought she was like the most wise, like, guru ever. So I'm quite glad we dodged that cringe, like, moment. So what do I think about Anthem? Anthem itself is just kind of there. I enjoyed it. I didn't think it was anything special. And I have other works of Rand that I want to read through next year, like Atlas Shrugged, for example, so I can really see one of her better stories and see exactly what, you know, the fuss is about. Anthem starts off really well. I like the dystopia, and it's very ahead of its time, I think. It's an impressive book, like, that a Russian immigrant to America that was a woman could become one of the most prominent writers of American fiction, or American literature. She's an impressive woman, no matter which way you, whether you agree with her or disagree with her, right? It's too political, it's too preachy, and the setup for the dystopia is good, but I feel the ending's very rushed. It doesn't really let itself get fleshed out enough. It's a rough diamond, I'd say, in the sense that, like, with some better editing and extrapolation, this could be an A-tier story, but, like, what did I say, extrapolation, what the hell am I saying? I'm talking out my ass. But some better editing and sort of, what's the word I want, like, workshopping. I feel that this book could have been a lot better than it is. As it stands, it's just kind of there, and it's not very long. I would recommend you read it if you're on the fence about Rand, because it's surprisingly well written, like very easy to read for a book as old as it is, and so yeah, I mean, it's just average. Yeah. So anyway, now we get into the first of the indie books I read, Breach of Peace. This book is bad. It's going into C. It's not quite D tier though. I don't know what D tier is for books. I know some people give 1-star reviews out like anything. I mean, I myself have received some 1-star reviews for my books before. I don't think 1 stars should be given that lightly, because I don't think Breach of Peace is quite bad enough to be a 1-star book. So what are the problems with Breach of Peace? Well, Daniel Green, he can't write. The guy just can't write, and I know this is his first novel or novella, but I heard he hasn't really improved that much. And I don't know if this series is just dead in the water now, because he's writing like some sci-fi stuff now, so I don't even know what's going on with that. But the characters are flat and lifeless and boring. Every character sounds the same. There's no real flair to the prose. It's very, very bland. It's easy to read prose, like it flows nicely, but that's the only thing I can give it. The world is kind of interesting, but very, very underdeveloped. It's got a bunch of like weird, like sort of modern day PC stuff in there, which doesn't make any sense to a fascist setting to like for them to even honor that. Or like it just sort of undermines the entire premise of like having this like, you know, evil Holy Empire thing. I don't know. It's a mess. The world's barely explained. The plot is pretty predictable. And mainly my main gripe is with the characters. They're so boring, and they all sound the same, and it's just bad. This should never have been published. But there's a few good things, though. I found the world interesting. Like, I actually found myself wanting to read more, and I'll be fair to him, he has a very, very bland, sort of, very modern prose style, but it's very easy to read. Like, it does read quite well. Like, it's not clunky, like some people's writing. So I will give Daniel Green credit. He just needs to add a little pizzazz to his prose, and I think he'd be a lot better. But Breach of Peace, not very good. Would not recommend. Yeah. Then we get The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. This can go into A tier. I love this story. It's sort of on that weird, like, it's like too long to be a short story, really, but it's way too short to be a novel, and it's probably too short to be a novella. But I really enjoyed this book, like, more than I thought I would. It's one of the best of those, like, old school horror books that I've ever read. The mystery is really well written, and I just wish that Jekyll and Hyde weren't so famous, because the twist would have been amazing if you read it, like, 100 years ago when it was, you know, when it came out. But, like, really, really good story, and it's surprisingly deep too. Like the themes and the what the hell was that? Anyway, the themes and the sci-fi concepts are actually really, really cool, and like way deeper and more high concept than I thought they were going in. And I really would recommend everybody to check this one out. Like, it's very short. If you're interested in old British fiction or gothic fiction or horror fiction, really, really good classic piece of literature to get into, and it's very easy to read, and it does have those deep themes that stuff like the next book we're about to talk about really doesn't have. So if you are like a kid in like school still and you have to do an English project, Jekyll and Hyde is a really good book to do it on, because it won't take you very long to read. You'll look smart for reading it because it's an oldie worldy book, and it's got enough stuff to write a ton of essays on. Very, very good story. I really enjoyed it, but once again, not quite good enough to be S tier. Like, it's just not got enough there. But yeah. Anyway, so we've got A Study in Scarlet, the first Sherlock Holmes book, and this book is bad. This book was disappointing. So I don't understand how Sherlock Holmes became such a big thing from this story. I understand John Watson is boring because he literally is just an audience surrogate, but Sherlock Holmes isn't that interesting either. The mystery is kind of cool, but the book sort of spends half the time just jerking itself off while Sherlock solves this mystery off screen, basically. And then we get an entirely separate story for that second half where it's like about Mormons, and it's much better. Like, the politics of the Mormon expansion into America, whatever that's going on in the Mormon towns in Utah, is much more, like, I would have much rather just read a story about Jefferson Hope and like falling in love with a Mormon girl and all that than having Sherlock Holmes just ruining the story. Like, Sherlock feels like an intruder into his own story in this, and it's just all over the place. But my biggest gripe is that the mystery does not play fair. It does not play fair. You do not get there is no way that the reader can solve the mystery. Right? Sherlock just pours information out his arse and it's like, oh, you didn't see that, Watson. And of course, I understand this because Watson himself doesn't see it, so therefore he can't relay it to us. But like, it's not worth it. Like, maybe I should read some of the later Sherlock Holmes books to see how it improves, similarly to like Lovecraft. But yeah, this is really rough. It's not even that well written. Like, it's not very good. Continuing the negativity train, we have The Shadow of the Conqueror by Shad Brooks. C tier for this one. This thing has one or two very good things going for it, and then a lot of just nonsense. I did a video on this, which is one of my most popular videos. I think it's my second most popular video. So there's chances are, if you're watching this channel at all, this is one of the videos that you would have first seen. That more aptly, and I can go into depth about my true views on Shadow of the Conqueror, but as it stands, the world building is really, really good. Like, I would love a source book for D&D or something that's set in Everfall, because, man, this world is cool. But everything else is terrible. The plot, there's no plot. If Shad shows a fundamental lack of understanding for structure of a story, which is something that Daniel Green did not, interestingly enough. I sort of compared the two because they were both YouTubers, and this is both their debut novels, and they're both fantasy dystopia kind of things. Well, Shad's isn't really a dystopia, but they're both sort of like high technology fantasy. Daniel Green at least understands the 3-act structure. Shad does not. Shad's prose is much better than Green's. Like, I think Shad's prose is perfectly fine, but the exposition... teeth back in. The exposition dumps are just mind-numbing. Dalen is a awful Mary Sue character, and just an awful character in general. Like, I hate Dalen, can't stand him. The plot is... there's no plot. It's just a long list of random side quest events that just happen back to back, and then the plot kind of just resolves itself. And it's got really, really weird, like, politics and, like, ethics and morals and stuff inserted in, which is, like... I understand what it's going for. It's going for the whole, nobody's like beyond redemption, but you have a character that fundamentally doesn't feel sincere in his own like repentance, and I don't know, the book is an absolute mess. It's just an absolute mess, because there's some stuff that's just so good, and I really wish that like Shad could have come up with this idea and given it to like an actually good writer who could have then done something with it, because the concepts are so good here, and it's just sad because it's not very good. Also, really helped to grow the channel though, this book, because Shad has, thankfully for me at least, gone and just he it seems to be the guy's just stepping on rakes. I don't know, like. Okay, I shouldn't really... I'm going on a tangent here, but, like, for some reason he decided to do a complete 180 and just become super political for no reason, which obviously alienated half his viewers. And then he started, like, just straight up, like, having deranged rants about Princess Peach wearing trousers or something on his, like, second channel, and then he went all in on the AI art thing for some reason. And then he made a video saying, everyone loves my book, where he like ignores negative reviews of his book. So he's just self-destructing, and I hope everything's okay in his own life, because man, this... Whatever. Moving on. We have Animal Farm. This is the first S-tier book that I'm going to put in. I almost didn't make it S-tier, because the older I get, the less I like Animal Farm, actually. But I still like Animal Farm a lot. And, I think this is one of the best satires ever written. It's fun. It's very easy to read. You could read this in like an afternoon. It's fantastic. It's basic anti-Stalinist literature, which you saw a lot of back then when this was written. But I think it just so eloquently and sort of childishly explains how these how these totalitarian like socialist governments take over and then get corrupted, and it's a really fun, effectively adult fairy tale, and I enjoy it every time I read it. I enjoy it. Benjamin the donkey is the goat, although he's a donkey, but you know what I mean. And yeah, Animal Farm, really cool book. Definitely S tier. Like, it's got a really tight story, really good characters, it's got deeper themes and messages, and it's just an iconic book. And I think everyone should read it. Even if you are a communist, you should still read it, because it's not anti-communist as everybody says it is. Well, it is, but it isn't. Like, I did a video on it. You can go watch... If you want my deeper opinions on any of these books, you can go watch my dedicated videos for them. But anyway... so we get the next indie book. We have Bleed More, Body More by Ian Kirkpatrick. That's a B. So I actually almost DNF'd this book. Which you may think, oh, it should be like a C or D tier. No, the book's not that bad. It just doesn't interest me particularly. This book is fine. If you like sort of fairly generic YA paranormal fantasy, I guess that would be, but like it's urban fantasy, like paranormal urban fantasy, I guess that would be up your alley. I just think that it has a couple of problems that prevent it from being truly good, and I personally didn't really like it. I thought it was a bit boring, and could have done a lot more with its premise, but it's B. It's a well put together book, and it's well written. Kirkpatrick has a very good voice and can clearly write well, but it's just, yeah, I don't know, didn't really like it that much, but I don't hate it. There's nothing wrong with it. Next, we get Splinter of the Mind's Eye. This was close to being in D tier, but I am popping it to C tier. So for those of you who don't know, this was the proposed Star Wars sequel to A New Hope that was released as a novel in like 1978. It's bad. Not only does it make no sense in the context of Star Wars, it's just a mess of a story. Extremely sexist. And just kind of... Like, when ranking Star Wars books, for me, I have to think to myself, if I took all connections to the Star Wars films out of this book, would it still work as a sci-fi story? Yes, but there's some serious problems here, and the plot is paper thin and contrived. It's just bad. It's just bad. It's one of the worst EU books, like from the OG EU. Luckily, Disney's made a lot of books that are significantly worse than this, so Alan Dean Foster has been redeemed, I guess. But I don't know. Not a fan. It's, once again, watch my main video on it, but it just stumbles and then falls off a cliff, and it's just bad. Anyway, The Legend of Sleepy... Sorry. So, The Legend of Sleepy Hollow is the next one. This is not a book, this is another short story by Washington Irvine this time. Really good. I was on the fence about this one. I'm putting in an A tier. I was on the fence about this one when I was sort of reading it. I was like, this is kind of... It reads okay, like it's quite old. But it's the Headless Horseman story. Like, it's the OG Headless Horseman story. It's quite good, and I'm actually not going to spoil it for you here, why it's good. Now, if you want spoilers, go watch my review, but this book will really make you think, not in the way you expect it to. It's just a fun book, and I really enjoyed reading it. Well, it's a story, it would take you like an hour or two maybe to read. Really, really, really good. I loved it. It was a fantastic ghost story. Really, really cool. Okay, so on the short story train we have Masque of the Red Death by Edgar Allan Poe. That's a B tier. It's fine. I'm not a big fan of Edgar Allan Poe, to be honest with you. I think he's very overrated. Now, I'm not the most well-versed in all his literature, but I have read a fair bit of it now. And the guy is just kind of... I understand that he's like first in, best dressed, a lot of the sort of macabre, gothic horror stuff, but like, A Masque of the Red Death is kind of cool, but I just think it's too short, and we don't really get time to experience the premise, and I think its themes are a little bit muddled as to what they actually mean, to the point where there is no official consensus on what the book's actually even about. Like, you can get my opinion of it on the video I made, but it's just kind of... It's alright. This reads like basically a Stephen King novel that isn't very good. Sorry, a Stephen King short story that really isn't very good. But it's B. It's perfectly fine. And I would recommend you check out some Edgar Allan Poe, especially if you're an American, just so you can read some of your country's great like literary artists, because there's just problems. It's just not that good, but it's not bad. It squarely sits in the this is an average book category. Okay, The Phantom of the Opera. This was a good book. I'm putting this in A tier. It's not S tier, it's just not good enough, but this was one of my favourite books I read this year. This surprised me. I really liked this book. I really enjoyed this. I seem to have a thing for like European Gothic horror, I guess, is generally where this is this whole thing is looking for me. But I really enjoyed The Phantom of the Opera. It is surprisingly deep for how old it is. Like, really quite good. Like, the ethics and the sort of not the ethics, the sort of the love triangle now seems contrived. Back then was probably pretty juicy, but but I don't know. It does a lot with character and does a lot with theme. That's really interesting and very nuanced, especially for the time. And it's also just a fun ghost story. It is just a fun ghost / romance story, and I think this is one of those stories that both like guys and girls will really enjoy, because I feel like guys will get into the ghost story aspect versus girls will get into the romance aspect. So there really is something here for everyone, and it's really, really good. I really enjoyed this. This was just a fun. This was just a fun, a fun story. Okay, so now we're getting into Johnny Got His Gun. Definitely S tier. This book is the single most disturbing and difficult thing I've ever had to read. I would recommend this to everyone. I'd also recommend this to basically no one, because it is really disturbing. Harrowing, beautiful, forever relevant. This has to be one of the greatest books ever written. And it's relatively obscure still, which is unfortunate. I understand that, Obviously, Metallica's song "One" really made this book more popular. And for those of you who don't know, the basic premise is it's about this guy who, this American soldier who goes to war in World War One, and he gets hit by a mortar shell, and it blows his arms and legs off, and then he ends up blind, deaf, and dumb, and is basically trapped in a hospital for the rest of his life because he didn't die, and the army's not allowed to kill him, and so it's horrifying, beautiful but horrifying. It's unlike anything I've ever read. And this is one of the greatest books that I've ever read. One thing I learned this year was just how good American literature is. Like, people don't really give America a lot of credit when it comes to literature, I don't think, because most people think of America as producing a lot of modern day classics, or modern day stuff. But the Americans really had some amazing novelists. I mean, you've got or just storytellers like Lovecraft, Poe, Rand, Dalton Trumbo, Stephen King. Like, all these, like, just masters. Washington Irvine. There you go. That Sleepy Hollow is American. Yeah, really, really good. But I would not recommend it. If you have a weak stomach, do not read Johnny Got His Gun. It's a difficult one. Here we go. So, The Pit and the Pendulum by Edgar Allan Poe. I think we have a D. I don't know how I feel about putting that in D, but I think we have a D. This story is shit. It's terrible. Nothing happens in it. So it's not written particularly well. It's not tense. There's no horror. There's no tension. The ending is a complete cop-out that comes out of nowhere, and it doesn't say anything. It's just, it is pointless. It's a pointless story. Don't read it. It's terrible. I don't understand. Like, this is just, nothing happens in it. It's just, oh, guy's in a cell, he's going to get killed, maybe. Oh, wait, the French killed the Inquisition, so he's fine. Okay, what's the point of the story then? Like, nothing happens. Terrible. There's not one good thing I can say about Pit and the Pendulum. Not one. It is a D-tier story. So we did it. We found a D-tier. Okay, anyway, so on the other hand, we have The Telltale Heart, which is A tier. I love this short story. It's so good. It's so short, and just the ending, I was like, I know where this is going, and I wanted to get there, because it was good. It really good. Telltale Heart, kind of whiplash there from going from a literal D tier Edgar Allan Poe story to a just like really good Edgar Allan Poe story, but it's fun. It's very short. You know where it's going, and when it gets there, you're like, oh, I knew it. Anyway, so moving on, we have The Dreams in the Witch House by H.P. Lovecraft. That is A tier. I really like this story. Like, I really, really like this story. This works as a really good horror story. It just works. It's creepy. You get that creepy vibe that you want from something like Lovecraft. But this is also like for fans of the lore of the Lovecraft like sort of legendarium. This has a lot of stuff. You get Azathoth. I'm gonna have trouble pronouncing these names. So you have Azathoth, who is the big bad, the Lord of Chaos. You have Nyarlathotep coming back here. You have witchcraft, you have evil dreams, it's just got everything going for it. It's a really solid horror story, and I would highly recommend it. Like, this is the best H.P. Lovecraft story I've read, I think, personally. I don't know, Call of Cthulhu can stay forgotten. Dreams of the Witch House is... Okay, and then we get Rita Hayworth and The Shawshank Redemption by Stephen King. I don't know where to put this one, because on one hand I really want to put this in S tier, but I just don't know if it's quite good enough to be S tier. I found... this is a tough one. Like, either it's right on the it's on the upper edge of A or the lower end of S, and we'll be positive. It's almost Christmas. We'll be nice. And we were very mean to Edgar Allan Poe, so we'll be nice to Stephen King. I've never seen the film. Really good story. Very short, very easy to read. Good characters. Stephen King, gonna have good characters. But I think it really does a good job of showing the ethics of the prison system, and it's just a very interesting premise. And I think, yeah, I don't know, it's a good book. It's a very solid book, and I think it says a lot, and I think it says it well. I think it says good characters, very good writing. I think it's gripping. I think that for once in a Stephen King book, the setup to the payoff is really good. Yeah, altogether, a very solid book, and I would highly recommend it to everyone. And now, we get to the last book I read this year, The Ocean at the End of the Lane by Neil Gaiman. This is definitely S tier. I loved this book. I didn't want to put it down. It was such a fun story, with such a really simple but very, very well explored premise that you don't quite get at the beginning where it's going with this. It really reads like a fairy tale written for adults. Like if you like Roald Dahl when you were a kid, you'll like this one. This is Gaiman at his best, and The Ocean at the End of the Lane is a beautiful sort of portrait of. For me anyway, it's sort of a beautiful portrait of childhood and growing up, and it's a lot of fun, and I would highly recommend. It's also very short. Once again, I do say that's a good thing. Not everyone has time to read, but like short books, short stories, check some of these out. And anyway, that concludes what I actually read this year. So, I think we were pretty fair. We read a lot of very almost bad stuff, and a lot of good but not the best it could be stuff, but looks of things. Reading these has helped me with my own writing in a lot of ways. And I struggle sometimes to read as much as I should be. I also am quite a slow reader. Believe it or not, like, despite having a channel that was originally started out to be devoted to reading and writing, I'm pretty slow at it. But I've really enjoyed reading these books, and making the videos and stuff has given me that little extra push, that drive to actually finish them, that I didn't have before. It's been a lot of fun. I've been enjoying making the videos, and they're not doing that well. Like, I think the Shadow the Conqueror ones, they did particularly well, but I don't know. I'm going to continue to read, and I'm going to continue to make my reviews and summaries, and then, yeah. And on the other hand, I have a long to be read pile. But if you are an independent author and you would like someone to review your book for you, hit me up, and we'll talk about it. Because I'd like to start to give back to the writing community, and. Yeah, so what does this channel look like going forward? I'll sort of add my little update on the end here. So my Dalek videos did quite well, sort of gained me a lot of subscribers, and people now sort of have a desire to see more Doctor Who related content, which isn't what I intended for this channel to be. Now, I love Doctor Who, don't get me wrong, but the Daleks were supposed to be like a deep dive into the Daleks as villains, because I like the Daleks a lot, and it was the 60th anniversary of Doctor Who, and they're a classic sci-fi villain, and so I thought, well, what better time to do it? But I am basically a Doctor Who YouTube channel now, I think, so I will be doing a deep dive into the Cybermen in the same way that I did the Daleks. That will be early next year. But and my own writing is still going. I am still occasionally posting short stories to my website. So if you would like to read some of my stuff, I have books on the market. You can find links to them. I also have short stories and even a full novella for free on my website that you can just either read on there or download. So I'd love people to check them out maybe, and see if I practice what I preach, I guess, because someone's got to keep me accountable. So, yeah. And thanks very much for watching, if you stayed for this long, and I would kindly ask that you give this video a like, maybe, if you enjoyed it, And Merry Christmas, or whatever you celebrate, and Happy New Year, and all that stuff. I might have one more video before the end of the year, but I don't know how much energy I'm going to have. So yeah, it's been real YouTube, and yeah, thank you very much, and Merry Christmas.